it's amazing.
We probably need to start videoing these because the audience can't see me nodding in Ascension. But I don't know. It's ascent? No, ascent, not ascension. Ascension is when you climb something, right?
I have no idea.
Oh, help me out here. But I'm nodding in agreement that they do care. These are tough stories to hear. It is hard to hear that over and over again. And what pulls you through is that hope, right? Mm-hmm. The light of hope. So what do you say to people who are looking at this career and they say, like I've heard so many times, like, I could never do what you do?
I heard that yesterday.
Really? Tell us about it.
Everybody has different passions. And honestly, what's funny is when I was going into my undergrad, I remember I was living in Lake Tahoe at the time, and the only really internship that I saw was a domestic violence shelter. And I was like, oh, I couldn't do that. I don't know if I could do that. As I got older and had my own experiences, I realized what it truly was. And whether it was manipulation, we've all experienced manipulation in our life. We've all, changed our mind or because of somebody else. It's more common than we believe. And even different aspects. So being able to go in there and help people, or all of us have felt alone at one time. We're trapped and we don't know what to do. So being able to talk to these women, and you know what, sometimes men, I get men too. Being able to talk to these people and know that, like, just let them know that they aren't alone, and that, you know what, there's somebody there and multiple people there that are willing to fight with them, not for them, but with them, so that they can get back on their feet, so that they can find their own strength again.
You just touched on a very interesting separation of terms there. We don't fight for people, we fight with them. Explain.
If you're fighting for someone, then they're not going to build that strength for themselves. And the truth is, in order to make it work, they have to find that strength for themselves. And you can't fight harder than them. When they want it, when they make their goals, just like treatment plans, if they're making their goals and they're creating it on their own, well, with the clinician, but when they're creating it, they want to do it. And then they know that they can, and then they have that support and backup to know that they can do it. They shouldn't need us forever.
So what you're doing is you're really creating a dynamic where they realize that A, they can do it themselves. B, they're not actually doing it themselves, they're doing it with somebody, which leads to C, they're not isolated anymore. Mm-hmm. So they have a team. And that's and what we want to foster is something called interdependence, right? Not codependence or dependence, but interdependence, because that's how human relationships work. We all need somebody at some point. And I think you made a valid point there earlier about how we've all experienced manipulation. And manipulation is not a dirty word. Mm-hmm. I manipulate the thermostat when I'm cold. It's not sinister. So, if I go into a job interview, I'm going to manipulate that prospective employer to like me the best that I can. And usually that's through a long, steady history of working really hard so my resume looks good. It's manipulation, and it manipulates me into the job I want. So what we're talking about here when we kind of use it as an epithet is when you're manipulating somebody and you're the only one that gains out of it, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a victim, or there's a trail of destruction left behind. So I want to spend a little time there too, and talk about how you work with folks who have been the subject of this very sinister manipulation, isolation, abuse, psychologically, physically, or otherwise, and how you start the conversation about hope is possible for somebody who maybe has never experienced that.
So it depends on the individual. Some people, I've used some self-disclosure, or just being able to help them realize maybe the life that they had prior. We might talk about, when was the first time you remember being truly happy? What did that look like? How can you get there again? What's the differences now than between then? And helping them realize what they used to have. And not everybody has that either. It's obviously an individual basis.
There's people who have lifetimes of abuse, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually extremely common. A lot of people that I get have either saw it with their parents that were abused. They watched the abuse, or a lot of different sexual assault history, child molestation. It's usually what I get is a lot of trauma throughout their life.
So what do you do with somebody who says, I don't ever remember being happy?
Then I want them to try to figure out what they believe happiness would look like. So what would it be to them? What if they woke up and they felt everything was perfect and everything was happy, what would entail in that? There's
something in solution-focused therapy called the miracle question. Yeah. That sounds like it.
'Cause it is.
Tell me about that.
I love the miracle question. The miracle question is extremely helpful because a lot of times people generalize happy. They're like, oh, I just want to be happy. Well, that's great, but being happy to me is a lot different than being happy to you. So I want to know their core beliefs of what they believe would make them happy and how they know when they get there.
So you're operating on the premise that they do know somehow on some level. They've either seen it in a movie or watched a bird flapping its wings in the sky. Like something that we just presume exists in the bottom of somebody's psyche somewhere. So we're not having to fabricate it out of thin air. Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself giving examples?
I have on a minor level just to give them an idea, but I definitely talk about the movie thing. I'm like, okay, you were watching, this romantic comedy and you thought it was like the greatest relationship ever. Okay, what made it so great? And then breaking that down.
So you're using analytics and you're getting them out of the emotional state of happiness or excitement or wistfulness or whatever it may be, melancholy even, and using them you're helping them use their frontal lobe to break it down. Now, why is this happy? What makes it happy? What's desirable to you about it? You're not actually challenging their worldview. Mm-hmm. You're helping them to wrap their arms around it. What then? Once they get the understanding of whatever they want, peace or love or connectivity, like the concept is now down. How do you help people move toward it?
To move toward it, well, that gives us the starting off point. Okay, so say one of the things on there was in order to be happy, they want to know how to have a healthy relationship. Well, a healthy relationship has boundaries, and boundary work is a lot of what I do because a lot of people weren't taught boundaries growing up.
Right.
So by working on boundaries, that'll help with keeping themselves safe on a safe level and people learning to look at red flags, learning to look at, who is healthy for me? What is healthy? How does that look for me?
What is a boundary? Can we define that? Because we all have an idea of what it is, probably. Like there's a gate or a line drawn or something. But what is it in practical terms? What is a boundary interpersonally when it's not a physical thing?
So, we work on a few different boundaries. There's physical boundaries, there's sexual boundaries, and there's energetic boundaries. Physical and sexual are the most common. People usually understand what those are. It could be a feeling. So like if somebody comes into your space and you're like, and you get that kind of weird, like, I want you to back up out of my bubble.
That seems like an energetic boundary.
No.
Oh, okay.
So an energetic boundary, at least to me, would be, say you're getting into a conversation with somebody and somebody says something maybe political that you don't like and it really makes you mad and you're having a difficult time getting it. So having somebody else affect you in a way that they shouldn't, that can be an energetic boundary.
So you're helping them understand the concept that no one can make you feel fill in the blank,
exactly.
Right? You allow that to happen to whatever degree you choose to allow it, which is a very foreign concept to most people. I think that I encounter. It's like we talk like this. He made me feel this, or it made me feel that, and I even teach emotions about external stimuli, circumstances, the environment will provide you a sense of emotion somewhere, right? And yet you're saying no, that's not entirely true.
Well, because like you said, we choose our emotions, and then we choose how it affects us. How long are we going to have it for? How intense is it going to be? Now,
someone's been listening to the podcast. Good job.
Yay! I get to keep my job. But it's one of those things like, how do I explain that? So if I have somebody who, like, same example. So somebody says something that I don't agree with, that I don't like. Instead of taking it to a place where they're personally attacking me, it's a place of, well, that's what they believe and that's where they're at. And that has nothing to do with me because I'm over here.
Right. So there's one of our fellow clinicians who actually has been on the show, Dave Reed, talks about a concept from object relations, which is self versus non-self. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're kind of dancing with that. So let's pull the lens back a little bit, because we're getting a little bit into the weeds, and apply it to something like a domestic violence relationship. The energetic boundary that's getting violated every time, quote unquote, buttons get pushed. Mm-hmm. My pushback to that is, well, who told them where your buttons were, and why are you allowing them to be pushed? And that gets some eyebrows cocked a little bit, because it indicates that maybe the buttons aren't up for pushing all the time. Mm-hmm. And maybe you get to decide where the buttons reside. So if you and I are talking and you say something like, you know, Jake, I really enjoy being an employee here, but I think the color scheme of Zephyr Wellness is entirely wrong. I don't like the blue. I think it should be tan and warm colors, not the cool, blues and grays. I can say, man, she just knows how much I love the blues. She's pushing my buttons by purposely antagonizing me with this brown thing. And now I could claim that you're pushing my buttons, right? But that's me handing over power to you. Mm-hmm. And what you're advocating is that I'm in control of whether or not I take that on and feel one way or the other about it.
Well, the initial emotion is going to be there. So
surprise, disappointment, maybe. Yes. Yeah, maybe I have to look critically at the idea that maybe not everybody likes blue, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. But then after that, it becomes your choice.
So I've taught that you don't necessarily get to choose what you feel, but you get to choose how much and how long you feel it.
Exactly.
And you also get to choose how you interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
So setting good boundaries requires a knowledge of oneself. And if something is not of you, you don't necessarily have to pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. But in order to get there, you got to know who you are.
Exactly.
And I think what we encounter oftentimes is a lot of people who have been through trauma histories, they've been neglected, they have been invalidated. They don't really know who they are.
Or given the opportunity to figure that out when they were younger.
Totally. Yeah, that's the lifetime, trauma history thing, right? So this is recoverable, and this is what you've been doing. Help the listening audience. Maybe people are listening who, are like, oh man, they're talking about me. Like I don't really know who I am. I'm just kind of floating in space. Walk generically through that, so that if somebody's listening, they can maybe have some tips and insights on how to, quote unquote, find themselves in order to differentiate from the stuff that's, triggering them all the time and attacking them.
So, I usually start with the external things in the aspect of, because it's easier to start there pretty much. Mm-hmm. So something like, what is something that you've always wanted to try?
Volcano climbing.
All right.
That's
an interesting one. Okay, I usually don't get anything that extreme.
Sushi.
So, and then maybe calling a friend, or even going by yourself, because that can actually be very, very empowering to do that. Or like I've suggested, there's like Reno has different meetups for all different things all around this town.
Really?
Yeah. They have people who like to walk their dogs around the marina, and it's free. They have been having like free first dance classes, or there's different events in the community that people with like interests can go and meet up. I had no idea. That's a little window into Jake's limited social life, is the fact that I don't know these things exist. And then there's like the Buddhist temple has a lot of free classes, whether it's yoga or donation, but whether it's yoga or whatever, there's a lot of different events, or the art school, there's a lot of different events around town that people can do for free or cheap, where just for self-discovery, be like, you know what, maybe I do like this. And then maybe they meet a friend. I've had people who go and then they were like, I met a friend that actually is interested in the same thing as me. So discovering what you like is part of knowing who you are. It helps. It definitely helps. It is a part of it. What about the part about pushing away the stuff that's not helpful? Like we're talking about defining a healthy relationship. Healthy relationships come with boundaries. Boundaries require you knowing yourself to know where your boundaries are, to push away the bad stuff and invite in the good stuff. So we've identified, go find stuff that you like, give yourself permission to like it, and don't worry about what voices are in your head telling you that you shouldn't, quote unquote, or you mustn't, But then we have to do something about repelling the negative ones. Yes, so we do a lot of work on self-talk, and which is how we talk to ourselves on